Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I'm your host, TheWriter. This is a show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. So we return once more to the campaign of Oceanrim. And Phudo Padclaw the Bullette-Slayer of the Padclaw tribe has laid a stake in the ground where his tribe is going to move inland after they have gained control of all the lands surrounding the rivers further away from Oceanrim. And after sealing up some cracks and fighting an elder thing and destroying the staff that was causing all the cracks to come open after they had resealed them, things kind of calmed down after a while. And I say, Phudo, I know we're not playing like Kingmaker or anything because that would be cool, but I don't understand how that game works. You've kind of got priority. You're the boss around here. And though you've only got, 27, 28 kobold at your command, you can basically tell them what to do to get this place ready for the 670 some odd other kobold that are going to be coming this way relatively soon. So, what are you going to prioritize? And Phudo sits and he thinks for a while, and he goes, well, we've got the river, so we've got water, and that'll be plenty of fish, and there's game around here and stuff, but, we've got that cave. We should start digging out that cave and preparing, like, dens and great rooms and, like, barracks for weapons and things like that. We need to start digging. So he sends all the kobold that he can into the cave, past the freshwater lake to just start tunneling. Just go all the way down as far forward and as far deep as you feel like and just start making rooms. And kobold are very good diggers. The lizard folk hired them to go under Oceanrim in a straight tunnel. So when they're digging out homes, they've got plenty of time, plenty of space. They've got their pickaxes and shovels. They've got their claws. They can tunnel however they want. They don't have to make the tunnels huge for people of different size categories. It's just going to be a kobold village or a kobold burrow, brand new. And so Phudo and Stands with a Fist are kind of sitting by the river, like relaxing, watching over everybody, watching them like bring like sacks of dirt out of the depths and like pouring it off to one side and then pouring some elsewhere and stuff like that. It starts to take on like a mound shape around the cave itself, but it still has all the weeping willows covering it. So if any humans come down the river on like a boat or something, they still won't see it. It's such overgrown wildland that they are pretty well hidden as long as they don't start building like houses out on the surface. They're pretty well hidden. And a few days go by, like 10 or 12, 14 days. Oh, so I guess 2 weeks. Sorry. So about 2 weeks go by, and things are going great. The younger kobold are doing all the fishing. Phudo has the chance to go hunting and bring back a buck or two. They're finding geodes and fish and crystals that have been swept clean by the river's motion. They're swimming. They haven't been able to go swimming in a long time. That's just great. This is a paradise for the kobold. And, they've got a couple of guards up in the high trees in case the random hunter should wander by and need to get shot in the face. And the tunnels go further and further down and deep below the land to make room for the Padclaw tribe before they move. They have this grand exodus of 700 kobold moving from one forest way inland, like a day's journey, to the place where the two rivers meet. That is going to be where the new Padclaw burrow is. And I think eventually Phudo started calling it like the Thirsty River Rock or something like that because water flowed out of it, so you could drink from the cave's water forever because it was basically a geyser or a reservoir of fresh water, so you could, no matter how thirsty you were, how many people there were, or kobold rather, you could quench your thirst there. It's the Thirsty River Rock. And so they started making like little kobold totems and like splitting the geodes open and decorating the outside portion of the tunnel, or the entryway rather, like they don't want to make something sparkly outside, but like 50 feet in, they start like lining the tunnels with geode pieces and torches so it shines and it's sparkly. Ooh, this is fancy. It's like mosaic art. But they've got flat stones for the floor. They've got all kinds of, this is starting brand new. It's like an anthill. You set up the terrarium and then you dump all the ants in and they go crazy. They do all kinds of cool stuff all at once. And even though there are only 27 of them, there's already a deep tunnel that goes to a freshwater lake. So that's going to be like a central hub for them, is an endless supply of fresh water. Yes, please. And they just flower outward in all directions with all different tunnels. Until somewhere around the 15th day or so, Little Miss, the little kobold from before, comes forward. Prince Phudo, they found something deep down in one of the tunnels. It's a big open space. And Phudo says, really? Take me there. And he grabs, stands with a fist, and he grabs the medicine man and the elder. There's like 4 important kobolds there, so he grabs all 3 or 4 of them, and they go down, and they find that basically the kobold have dug into a tunnel that was filled in. Like, it's not dirt and rock like naturally forming, it's red clay, and eventually it levels out into straight up stonework. And it's like, this is not naturally, this is not a mesa, there's no red clay here. And the stonework alone is advanced. Somebody built this, and they've been like clawing their way through this tunnel to find like a hallway, and then they found like an open room. So this place was buried a long time ago with earth and clay and sand, and they probably like kicked supports down to just irreparably bury this place. Lord knows how long ago. But there's like a structure down there. There's like a dungeon complex or something. And Phudo's like, well, this would help if there's already like a bunch of rooms down here or a bunch of caves or something. But we better make sure it's safe. Send all the diggers back, Little Miss. Have them like take a lunch break or something. And Stands with a Fist and I will go check this out, because if there's like a dungeon down here that the lizard folk failed to mention, because this used to be their land, then he needs to check it out and make sure it's safe for all the other members of the Padclaw tribe. Because if it's empty rooms, hey, great, that's less digging for them to do. But if there's like carrion crawlers and zombies and bullshit down there, they need to go clean it out first. When they entered this cave, they were expecting a bear, and, they had to fight an elder thing. So God knows what they've uncovered now. And Phudo's like, well, it's just me and Stands with a Fist. We should see if we can get any other kobold to come with us. And, of course, they can't take the medicine man because he's old and frail and the only healer. And they can't take the shaman because he's old and frail and he's a wise man. They need him for his knowledge. It's like, well, all right. I go out in front of the whole group and I was like, will anybody come with me down into the dark below? And I was like, Phudo, do you have the leadership feat? And the leadership feat lets you roll to get like minions and stuff. He's like, no. I was like, okay, roll me straight charisma. It's like, it's not a good chance, but roll me straight charisma. And he actually rolls pretty high. And he gets the leader of the diggers who has like his pickaxe and his shovel, and he's got like a little helmet with a space on the top, like a lantern, and he puts like a candle up there, and take candle, ha ha. And I was like, shut up. That he's got like a bundle of candles on his hip, and he can light a candle and put it in his little helmet and, dig down into the darkness deep, and he serves as a light source. Because kobold have dark vision, but if you're in like complete darkness, you can't see color. So if you run across like a ruby or something weird while you're digging, you wouldn't be able to see it very well because there's no light to make it red. That's all, it's just black and white when it's night vision. So they put the little candle on them, so if they run across like gems or something shiny, they'll be able to see it or see color or something like that. heaven forbid they run into like a strip of like gold ore or something because they don't have smelting abilities. But you never know what you're going to find when you dig too deep. So his name was Carries the Light, which, yeah, everybody's got a tribal name. Stands with a fist, carries the light, Little Miss. I guess Phudo's tribal name just would have been Bullette-Slayer, which would be a badass tribal name. He's Phudo Padclaw, but if he's got a tribal name amongst his people, it would be Bullette-Slayer. I was like, oh, that's a badass name to have. Or maybe actually a better way to explain is you would have like a normal name until you had like a job or accomplished something amazing, and then you would get like your adult name. You would have like your child name until you did something cool or graduated into your career, and then you would get like, stands with a fist, she punches things. Carries the light, he carries the light. But hey, that's his job. You got to have ditch diggers if you're going to have a good farm, etc., etc. So carries the light, lights a candle, and he puts it in his little helmet. He's got his pickaxe in one hand, and he's got his shovel on his back. He looks unsure of himself, but he's probably one of the stronger kobold present, so he's probably got like one level of fighter or something. And by now, Phudo and Stands with a Fist are like level 9. So, if things come to blows, then he's gonna die because he's a kobold and he's a civilian. So he serves as a light source. And a lot of D&D players don't realize, hey, you can hire a guy to come with you and like carry your shit, or a guy to come and like hold the torch while you're fighting everything, just kind of look around and looking scared. Because if you've got both your hands free, it's a lot better than only having one hand free, because otherwise your DM will ask you, hey, who's carrying the torch? Which basically means, hey, who's not holding their shield? Or hey, who's not using a bow and arrow because they've got one hand with a torch? So think about it during your next D&D game. If you need somebody to carry like a torch, hire a dude. Give him 10 gold and say, hey, follow us around into this cave. They'll do it, because 10 gold's a lot of money to a civilian. Anyway, so Bullette-Slayer Phudo Padclaw stands with a fist and carries the light to go down into this hallway, into the dark below, the darkness deep. And it's several hundred yards. So this was a well-hidden dungeon, facility, crypt. It's not really clear. They do see a lot of hieroglyphs and like cryptic writing that the lizard folk had left behind. He tells with a few dungeoneering rolls that it displays like krakens and whales and fish with legs running around with spears and things that don't really make a lot of sense to Phudo. But based on all the weird shit he's seen lately, none of it surprises him. So they finally come up to where the kobold have finished digging out, and there's like 20 more feet of hallway that's been untouched by all the collapsing, and they emerge out into a great room. Now I know, having been at this as long as I have, that just detailing like a dungeon run is not very interesting, because you're not progressing the story, you're just kind of playing the game. It's like, oh, there's this 50-room dungeon, let me tell you about all 50 rooms. No, we'd be there all day. Or we'd be here all day. So I'll just give you the highlights and tell you what Phudo and Stands with a Fist and Carry the Light learned in the meantime. So there's a like a bluish gray tint to the entire place. It's like it's slate and it's stone. And it's, none of these materials are from here, because this was all like earth and gravel and quartz rocks, and that's about it that the kobold had been digging out. So this stone is not local, and there's a thin layer of cold water, and of course Phudo and Stands with a Fist try it. It's actually fresh water, and there are little grates, like maybe an inch or two high on each wall, that keep the water flowing so it doesn't have time to sit and stagnate or sit and spawn a million mosquitoes or anything like that. And Stan carries the light, kind of looks around. You can tell he's kind of cowardly, but he's braver than all the rest of the kobold who stayed behind, or stayed behind for safety on Phudo's order. So they walk around. This place kind of spirals out in different directions, so it is a complex. Now, some dungeons run sort of like hallways, like there's only one way to go, and that's a great way for a DM to kind of control the situation. But if you make like a dungeon complex, it's like, hey, there's 2 doors over there, and there's 3 doors over there, there's some double doors ahead of you, there's the door behind you, and there's a hallway that veers off in this direction. They can go wherever they want, and it makes the dungeon more intimidating because you have no idea which direction to go or why or in what order. Do you go to the door just closest to you? Should you go around the hallway and explore this room some more? Do you just go straight ahead because the double doors are the biggest? They don't know. So it can make players nervous if they've got like a ton of choices on direction when it comes to dungeons, especially if there's locked doors, trap doors, stone doors that don't open without switches, things like that. It can sell the mystique of a dungeon if it's more than just like, go this way until you reach the end and fight the boss. So I'm looking at you, Wrath of the Lich King, or Final Fantasy 13. Fuck you in your hallways. So I guess I'll just kind of give you the highlights of the dungeon. Phudo and Stands with the Fist and Carries the Light kind of wander this place for a while. And there's nothing alive down here because it was buried God knows how long ago. So they find a place with like culty robes and like painted sticks and stuff like that, and ancient shoes nobody would be wearing. They find like a toilet because there's running water here, basically. They find like anointment rooms where you could stand in the magic circle and like pour oil on yourself, and people shake their sticks over you and stuff like that to prepare yourself to enter further into this magical cloister. And Phudo's like, a lot of work went into this place because stonework is not easy to do, especially underground. So this was dug out, this was built. The plumbing and waterworks alone would have cost God knows how much gold. And it all flows in and of itself to keep the water clean, to keep the toiletry out, to prepare your body to go in with all these clothes and magic rituals and shit. And he wanders further, and of course they find the trapped hallway. The tiles are all marked with symbols. Which ones do you go on, Phudo? And he checks them out. I was like, one symbol's a flame, and one symbol's a swirl, and one symbol's like a raindrop, and one symbol's like a mountain. And it's just this long hallway. And Phudo's like, okay, I walk down the hallway, and I roll the D4 to see what symbol he lands on, and he gets hit in the face with like a fireball immediately. If he wasn't like level 9, like as a kobold, he's got 9 levels of ranger, he would have blown up straight away. But he gets knocked on his ass by a fireball, and then he lands on another tile with a big swirl on it, and it launches him into the ceiling with a phantom breeze. So it's like boom, ah, psh, psh, and just he comes back like cartoonishly black and smoldering and missing most of his health. So of course he has to take some potions and like cast cure light wounds on himself. He's like, okay, this is dangerous. And he tells Stands with a Fist and Carries the Light. It's like, don't step on anything. And so he studies the tiles more closely now, and because I'm the kind of DM that occasionally will just have a fancy looking hallway with nothing in it. But Phudo's player knew that, so he called my bluff. Not this time. So Phudo saw, oh, there's a flame. I got hit with a fireball. There's a swirl. I got thrown by a phantom breeze. There's a mountain and a raindrop. Let's try those. He's trying to figure this out in his head. Like, he doesn't want to get hurt more or send Carries the Light forward to just die, because the dude looks like he could bolt any second, because he's very frightened. He's just a kobold. He's just a digger. He doesn't need to be running dungeons. God forbid they run into a monster. He'll just bolt, and you'll never see him again. But after a while, Phudo kind of works it out. I was like, gosh, there's water out there, and all these weird cracks are appearing on the surface of water, and the lizard folk are clearly like worshipping or bringing forward things from this water. They wanted that watery staff that like rips open portals to other location, to other, like the elemental plane of water or whatever it happened to be. And we get to the point where Phudo realizes, oh, everything here is water themed. Got it. So they kind of Indiana Jones their way across, trying to just like step on the tiles that are marked with the raindrop symbol, and they get across safely. And the dungeon just keeps going off in all different directions. And he's like, oh my god, what is this place? And eventually they come across like a circular hallway. It's piped shaped, and it has a curtain of water going across the entrance and a lever. And Phudo's like, He kind of goes the smart route and doesn't touch anything. He sticks his head through to see it's pretty much an empty hallway. It goes past the curtain of water maybe 20 feet, but clearly this lever is for something, but he doesn't want to touch it because he's got a civilian and he's got his partner with him. So he's like, oh, let's just leave that there since we don't know what it does. And they wander on into a sort of prison complex. There are cells with bars and the remains of bodies, most of which seem to be human, elven. One of them is lizard folk, but they're kind of torn up. They're misshapen. They're mummified because there's no water here to decompose the remains, but they're all naked. They're dried up like husks, but like this one has like legs that are way too long for what it is. Or this guy's got a big head. It's kind of strange looking. This guy's eye socket is way too big compared to his other eye socket. You know, Phudo doesn't know a lot about skeletons, but you know, if one eye socket is 3 times bigger than another, you know something's wrong. And he's got like his crossbow out. He thinks something's gonna jump up and get him, but nothing ever does. And meanwhile, Carries the Light is starting to just kind of tremble, because this is some really horrific stuff. There's spider webs on all these things. They look like freaking death. They're horrible. And they wander further on to find what can only be described as a laboratory. It's got alchemy tables, it's got bookshelves with the ragged remains of books on it, and it's got a slab with another body on it. And it's like, come into the lab, you can see what's on the slab. But there are lizard folk versions of like the Vitruvian man that Da Vinci made, the guy with his arms in all different positions and his legs in all different positions to kind of do anatomy drawings. There are lizard folk versions of those with like their tails and their snouts and stuff in different directions. And Phudo goes and he gets on his tippy toes, or tippy claws, I guess, to see what's on the slab. And it's the mummified remains of a lizard folk person just left there. And there's ancient blood stains. There's ancient like remains. He's like cut open. His belly and his intestines were just like shriveled up into almost nothing. Like touching him would probably make the whole thing collapse. But one of his arms has been replaced with the leathery remains of a tentacle. And he can see where like some really shoddy like stitch work was done, and there are runes drawn here and there on his shoulders, on his chest, with just the crusty remains of paint or magic ink or something like that. They were experimenting. The lizard folk were experimenting on their own kind to do something. There was a bin off to one side that had just like bones and what was probably full of body parts at one point. There's several skulls. There's like little shriveled up arms and feet and different things like that. You know, again, another one of the skulls has just an eye socket that's like size of a softball, when, you know, lizard folk have eyes the size of golf balls. You know, they were twisting their own kind into weapons, experiments. Something bad was going on here. And Phudo picks up, like, these just, I don't know. I keep saying ancient remains, but that's kind of all it is right now. These really old, like, scrolls and papers and stuff that just got left there. And he goes, gosh, you know, it seems like they left in an awful hurry or something like that, because they left all their shit just, like, out over the desk. You know, none of the alchemy stuff is still good. It's all spoiled or evaporated or things like that. And I say, Phudo, you pick up these papers, but it's just kind of, it's like math and geometry. It's like when you take chemistry in high school, and then you're horrified because you find out that chemistry is just a math class in disguise. That's all it is. It's numbers and angles and amounts and things. And we kind of went off to the side and said, yeah, Phudo is smart enough to read, because he's got a high enough wisdom score that he can read common, and across most languages, numbers stay the same. So you can read it, but it doesn't make a whole ton of sense. And he's like, fine. But he does come across a key. And when you're in a dungeon, keys are important. So he takes the key with him. And Carries the Light makes the mistake of wandering in and looking at all this horrible stuff. And they go off to, like, another side room where it's another laboratory. And they see, like, the mummified remains of a lizard folk person, like, crucified up on the wall. And even though he's shrunk up and, like, leathery and stuff, you can tell they were cutting him open. They were experimenting on him. Both of his arms have been replaced with these 20-foot long leathery tentacles. His head is off to, like, one side, like he broke his own neck to die so he wouldn't feel this pain anymore. There's, like, pools and pools of dried up blood all around him, and, like, scalpels and surgical tools just scattered around the room, like hacksaws and horrible things. Like, they were doing horrible things to their own kind, and it wasn't really clear, like, were they building an army? Were they trying to make, like, super lizard folk that would, like, grab you with their tentacle arms? Were they trying to make lizard folk that were, like, twice as big, you know, like giant lizard folk or something? You know, where are they getting all these parts and tentacles? Did they hack each other up? You know, can lizard folk regenerate limbs? And I was like, sometimes. I don't know. I had to go looking in the bestiary to see if lizard folk could actually regenerate things, and I don't think they can. Trolls can, but I don't think lizard folk can, like, regrow limbs, but most of the time. But we just said they did in this case. So, gosh, wouldn't it be awful to be, like, caught in a lab somewhere and they hack your arm off, and then you spend months regrowing an arm and they hack it off again to use it as parts for their nasty, horrible experiments. And, you know, these remains, these mummified, rubbery corpses are all that's left to show what they've been doing around here. And so Phudo bags the papers, and he's got the key, and by now Carries the Light has seen enough, and he bolts. I was like, I rolled like a will save to see if he would overcome his fear and stay around. Nope, he ran for it. So I said, okay, Phudo, you are plunged into darkness, even though that doesn't matter because you're a kobold. But everything is black and white now, so anything like shiny colors, anything that is a reflective surface, it's just going to be black and white and gray from now on. So it's going to make spotting treasure and spotting unusual things far more difficult. So Phudo, of course, lights a torch, and he stands with a fist carry it, since, you know, her fists are her weapons, so she would just get one attack instead of 4 attacks if she's got one fist ready. And they search for Carries the Light, but he is gone. So he ran back out through the Indiana Jones hallway. He hopscotched through all that, and he ran screaming out the front door. I said, you're not going to see him again in this dungeon, and if you go to fetch him, he probably won't come back in. So well, he was good while he lasted, I guess. We can't really ask a whole ton. He's not a kobold hero like us. And Stands with a Fist kind of rolls her eyes, but he's got to do the leadership thing and keep exploring to make sure that this place is safe, because they can clear out all this horrific stuff and like burn it or bury it or things like that. And in fact, I think he set fire to the bookshelf that was in one of the labs. It's like, if the lizard folk ever came back for this shit, we don't want them to get any ideas and start like kidnapping kobold and hacking them up and attaching weird parts and experimenting on them. So we will just destroy all this, and if they want to try it, they can come get us, but none of this research, none of this progress will be left behind. So other than the small handful of papers that he got, the rest of the dark magic spell books and horrible physiology books that were showing all these nasty things they were trying to do got burnt up. And Phudo closed the door, which probably choked out the fire now that I think about it. But the bookshelf was on fire as they were leaving, so he trapped the smoke all in one room. And they move on, and just from the prison cells, from the horrible laboratories, from things like this, he kind of gets the feeling that the lizard folk were trying to strengthen themselves, to attach weird parts, to grow twice as big, twice as strong, to build some kind of fighting force. But these places were hundreds of years old. Like this would have been several centuries ago, and to do it on such a small scale, they clearly didn't know what they were doing. They were still working it out at the time, and clearly they didn't use any of it, because the lizard folk look like lizard folk. They're not giant slathering monsters. But whatever they were preparing for at the time, this was not the way to go about it. So whatever happened to the lizard folk they were doing to themselves back then, it must have failed, and then they moved on with something else, and they're still around today. But clearly they were trying to make weapons of themselves, and it didn't go so hot. So this secret facility underground may have been a secret to the lizard folk themselves. Maybe they just like had a few like flesh melders and witch doctors and stuff that were just working on a few unfortunate lizard folk, trying to work like just body horror. I don't know how else to describe it, just body horror, to build their own citizens into something nasty in preparation for something worse. So, but we'll get to that later. Now, Phudo's got a key, so he starts looking for locked doors. And they go through all these different rooms, and it's not really like a dungeon. I mean, if you've built like a medical facility, like the Hive, or like this place where you're experimenting on people, you don't want death traps everywhere, because it would kill all your scientists or all your witch doctors or whatever. But there are security measures here and there. And again, just talking about it as a dungeon doesn't really make a whole ton of sense. But eventually, they come up to a long room that has a giant, very appealing-looking treasure chest at the end of it. And Phudo's like, oh, look, it's a locked treasure chest. I can take the boss key there. I was like, shut up. And Phudo and Stands with a Fist start walking forward, and a pair of spinning saws come out of both of the walls to try and take their heads off. And Stands with a Fist tackles him to the ground, because she's a monk. She's got much faster reflexes. Tackles him to the ground to where they're like both almost like kneeling over each other, and these spinning buzz saws sticking out of the ground slowly grind to a halt and then go back into the walls. Is like this was like spring-loaded bullshit that they stepped on. And I said, Phudo, if you'd been standing there when those went off, you'd have lost your head, or at least like the top, like from the forehead up, you'd have lost your brain. Any like human or elf or whatever would have been cut like around the waist and fallen in half, but it would have just sliced your head off, like the top of your head off. You would have been dead. He's like, well, I'm glad Stands with a Fist has such a good reflex save. Jeez. And Rangers have good reflex saving throws, don't get me wrong, but monks are better. So she saved his ass. And they kind of crawl forward after that. And of course there's buzzsaws that are inlaid in the floor, so they've got to like go to one wall and go around them. And then there's two more that come out of the walls, so they go around those pressure plates because they can kind of identify them now. And they get all the way to this big locked chest at the end. And Phudo's got the key. He's like, yeah, key. And he puts the key in the padlock and it doesn't work. He's like, shit. How do I get this open? He looks over at Stands with a Fist. He goes, Stands with a Fist, can you break this open? Or can you break the padlock? And Stands with a Fist kind of smiles at him, and she folds her arms, and she looks at the chest, and she looks at him, and she looks at the chest, and she looks at him, and then she reaches over, and she makes a fist with like her mithril arm, and she like just bonks the top of the chest. And this chest is made of wood, and it's hundreds of years old, so it just kind of caves as she gently like bops it, and she just kind of breaks the lid off, and the entire padlock, the mechanism, it all just goes with it. So she basically like breaks the lid off and tosses it aside and says, don't worry, Prince Phudo, sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. It's like, thank you, Stands with a Fist. You're welcome. And she kind of pats his head. And they both like put their hands on the edge of the chest, and they lean over and they look in because it's fancy velvet, like enchanted velvet that doesn't get like hard and dusty over time. And laying inside the chest is an ominous looking book, like a grimoire, a book that is covered with white silk and pearls and like seashells and things like that. It's very ornate with stuff that's attached to the wooden bindings. And Phudo picks it up, and he's been in this campaign long enough to know that this is like a Call of Cthulhu campaign, so he's not sure he wants to read it. But at the same time, though, it was in a locked chest at the back of a dungeon. He really wants it. So he undoes the clasp, and he opens it just to see what the title is. And it is called The Queen in White. Now, if you know your Lovecraftian lore, the Queen in White is a play on words for the King in Yellow. And the King in Yellow is a grimoire that has horrible truths about the true nature of the universe and shit like that would drive you mad should you read it all the way through and learn the secrets of how your world works and stuff like that. The fact that you're on a speck of dirt in the swirling endless void of the cosmos and how horrible that is, and it would drive you mad. But the Queen in White clearly has something to do with all this water-oriented stuff because it's covered with pearls and seashells and white silk. And Phudo's like, okay, I'm just going to read the first page. He's pushing his luck. I'm going to read the first page to see what it's actually about. And I say, Phudo, you stop to read the first page, which is unusual because you're probably one of the only kobold in the Padclaw tribe that knows how to read. And, Stands with a Fist kind of folds her arms and, like, leans. And, she can see the letters, but her wisdom or whatever isn't high enough to actually read books. But Phudo kind of paused through it for a second. And I say, Phudo, you try to read it. You even try to read it out loud. But it seems like your mind just kind of rejects whatever it is you're reading. Because as soon as you're done reading a paragraph, you forget what you've read. And you read it again, and then you forget what you've read. And you read it again, you forget. And he's like, it's got some kind of enchantment on it. It's like, it's got like a forgetfulness spell on it, Stands with a Fist. I read it, and then I don't remember what I've read. And she's like, can you read it out loud? And he tries, but neither of them remember what he says. So this book is enchanted to where once you've read it, you don't know what you've read. So they close it, frustrated, and they put the clasp back on. It's like, well, we better hang on to this just in case. And so he stuffs it in his bag. Okay, it's like, okay, you've got the Queen in White. The only thing you've got out of this thing is a title, and the fact that the cover itself is probably worth like 30,000 gold, because that's a lot of pearls. That's a lot of ornate seashells, and that silk alone is probably worth a bit too. So, as like a piece of antiquity, it's worth a lot of money. So, take good care of it. He's like, well, whatever's in here is obviously important, so I'm not going to just sell it. Not that there's any kobold that would have 30,000 gold, much less anybody he could go to. He can't go to Oceanrim and sell anything. We've already established that. But he's got the Queen in White. And it's like, this is a play on words for a Lovecraftian, like, grimoire. This is not, whatever's in here is not good, but his little kobold brain can't take the text itself, so he's going to have to find a different way, or like a lens of truth, or a translator, or a de-spell scroll, or something else to make this book readable. Or perhaps a rather knowledgeable scholar. But he puts the Queen in White in his bag, and they go on, and of course he finds the key goes to a different door that is also, it's like a study. It doesn't have an alchemy lab or anything in it, but it's got just rows and rows of books. It's got a desk. It's like, this is like where the findings would go. There's a great big chalkboard and things like that in it. And he finds a map that looks like it's been torn out of something. And he goes, wait! And he opens up the Queen in White, and of course the torn out map is from the Queen in White. And he goes, what is this map of? And I go, it's the local region. You can see Oceanrim, you can see the rivers, the coastline, etc., etc. And there's a few places that are circled. And he goes, really, what are the circled places? He said, well, one of them is Oceanrim. He goes, okay. I said, one of them is this facility, whatever you want to call it, the dark lab, the dark laboratory of the lizard folk. He goes, okay. And he goes, what's the third one? He goes, the third one is sitting squarely on the Padclaw burrow. And he goes, what? The Padclaw burrow, where there are 670 some odd innocent kobold milling around? And he goes, yeah. And I go, yeah, all these other two locations are the places where you've seen all the cracks that lead to the city below the city. Remember? You saw one in the waterways under Oceanrim. You saw one in the river here, and you saw one in the underground lake. These seem to be like weak points or choke points between this world and the elemental plane of water. And he goes, oh God, these are weak spots. These are places where cracks tend to occur. He's like, we got to get back. We got to go home. We have to go back to the burrow, like right now. And he stands with a fist by the shoulders, like, we have to get back. There's 700 kobold at home that are in mortal danger, and it's a day's journey to get back. We have to go now. So, of course, they run all the way back out of the dungeon. They've pretty much explored the place now. There's no monsters, no anything like that. And on their way out, they pass by that lever again, where the tube-shaped hallway is. And he's like, I gotta try it. Before we go, hang on. Stands with a fist, stand over there. So he grabs the lever and he throws it, and the curtain of water becomes a portal, and it rips open into the elemental plane of water, and a giant tentacle rushes out and stands with a fist around the middle and starts yanking her back. He's like, I throw the lever back again. I've seen enough hentai to go where this is going. I throw it back again. It's like, okay, roll me reflex to see if you're quick enough. He rolls. He actually rolls really well. And he shuts off the portal again. It's just like a sheet of water, again, tumbling down over this hallway. And it snaps the portal closed, thankfully, stands with a fist still on this side of it. And it severs the tentacle. So now they've got like a 40-foot tentacle just flopping around that's been detached from its owner. And he rushes over to help her get like untangled from this thing. He's like, are you right? Stands with a fist. Yes, I'm fine. I just got this, like, she had to roll to not succumb to like numbing agent, because like the suckers had little needles inside that were pressing in on her sides and on her ribs. It's like, did it violate you with its tentacles? No. We still need to talk about that, by the way. No, I'm just making sure you're okay. So they untangle her from this tentacle, and they book it. They run all the way back outside. Prince Phudo, is everything okay? No. The Padclaw burrow is in extraordinary danger. Tell everybody to keep digging. Stay out of that open area. We haven't declared it safe yet. In fact, fill in that little bit of tunnel and just dig in a different direction. We've got to go. So Phudo and Stands with a Fist, they grab the, I think the shaman healer and the wise man, and they both, and they eat a quick meal. They grab, whatever healing potions they can and go, okay, you guys take care of yourselves. We have to rush back. It's an emergency. Bye. And they double time it. Almost like up during the day, which is unusual for them because kobold have those great big cave-dwelling eyes and they don't need to be out during the day. So they're squinting through freaking sunlight trying to get back as fast as they can. And, a day's worth of travel is like 8 hours. And they're not trying to be quiet. They're not darting from rock to rock or foliage to foliage. They actually get on the road, which was a big risk for them because they could have run into a contingent of knights or adventurers or any other things that would have cut them to pieces because they're kobold. Just sheer numbers, they would have died. And I rolled it on fate like 6 times. Very lucky, Prince Phudo, that you managed to cross the bridge, go past the river back towards the coast to the Padclaw burrow to warn everyone. But by the time they get there, it's too late. Phudo, Stands with a Fist, the shaman healer, and the wise man crest a hill, and they find, jets of water just fanning out like an apocalyptic peacock in all directions. And they find that the Padclaw burrow has been exploded from the inside out, and a crack the size of the fucking San Andreas has opened up right under their home. There's water everywhere. There's bodies floating by. There's pools of blood, dead kobold everywhere. Trees knocked down like some kind of fucking bomb went off. And Phudo kind of falls to his knees in horror, looking at just the sheer number of body parts he can see just floating around in the water. This is the stuff of fucking nightmares. It's like, it must have been like directly under the feasting hall. Like, there's no way they could have had any time. Like, if there was a fire, kobold can have a fire drill, but a sudden explosion of water and magic in your underground home, they didn't have a chance. They didn't have a chance. And I say, Phudo, you don't see anybody. You don't see anybody. The water is almost up to like their shins or their knees. And, they're kind of in this bowl shape. And they rush down there just to look for anybody. Anybody that's alive. The water is gushing in. This crack is hundreds of feet long and probably a few feet wide. The last couple of cracks they've seen have been, 6 feet long and a couple of inches wide. Even the one that had the elder thing coming through it was maybe 10 feet long and maybe a foot wide. It was small potatoes. This ate up his tribe. Just the whole thing. It imploded outward, gushed with water, and destroyed the hidden structure that was his home. And I said, Phudo, everything's gone. Everything's gone. The feasting hall, your home, your belongings, the hatchery where the baby kobold were, all the barracks where the weapons and supplies were, the foodstuffs and storages, the kobold that lived there. If they weren't outside at the time, their chances are almost nothing. And they can already feel the tears. They can already feel the horrible trauma that is going to come over them the next time they lay down to sleep. And I go, Phudo, there's nobody left. Unless, like, all the hunters were gone, or if a bunch of the children were out in the forest, there's nobody left. This was so sudden. This was like dropping a bomb on them, or rather, putting a bomb under them. It was so fast, so sudden, and it ripped the earth open. This was a canyon now. And at the bottom of this canyon is a crack that leads to the elemental plane of water. The Padclaw tribe is gone. You can see, your siblings are probably gone. Your father is nowhere to be seen. The civilians and little kobold, there's bodies and body parts and blood everywhere. They had zero chance. And Phudo and Stands with a Fist and the healer and the wise man rush around just looking for anybody who's alive. They're floating by with their tails limp. There's just like hands with claws like sticking up out of the water. And then they come across the one bit of movement that's not water in the entire area, and it's an abaya. An abaya is a gigantic, like Call of Cthulhu-esque eel. So if you remember like the eel from Super Mario 64, imagine that, but with like eyes, like lots and lots of eyes all over its head, like nasty dripping fangs that can control water, by the way. So it can go across land. It can basically grab up X number 100 gallons of water, so it can glide across the land however it wants. Plus it has all the properties of an electric eel. So it's a nasty, gigantic monster. It's a leviathan. It's horrible. It's teeth and tons of eyes, and Jesus Christ, it's awful. And who should be standing amongst the ruins but Phudo's father, the chieftain of the Padclaw tribe? He's standing there with his little broken crown made of colored glass. He's got his little stick and his tattered cloak, and he's the only kobold standing. It's like the king is the only one left. And Phudo's like, Father, no! He's standing in front of this abaya. And I say, Phudo, he reaches up and he unclasps his cloak, and the wind carries it away like so much rags before it falls into the water. And he lifts his staff high. And I say, Phudo, you remember when you watch Star Wars and you get that icy chill when you see Yoda whip out his lightsaber? You're just like, ah, this is going to happen. That feeling, that is what you feel when you watch your father suddenly strike this giant monster with a lightning bolt. Because the chieftain's staff is a staff of lightning. And he blasts this monster right in the face, just lightning splits the sky and it forces back just this gigantic shockwave of water to start this battle. He shocks it again. One kobold versus a leviathan. Yeah, lightning bolt is an overpowered spell, don't get me wrong. It can be like a fistful of D6s to throw. It's the most overpowered fucking spell in the game. And this monster is covered with water, and the chieftain is standing in water, so depending on how you want to run that can be pretty scary. But he starts shocking this thing with lightning, and Phudo's like, Stands with a Fist, come on, let's go! And he grabs his crossbow, and he leans out, and he starts like shooting the crossbow. But, its rubbery hide is like repelling most of his bolts, and Stands with a Fist runs, and she punches it with her mithril arm, like right in the jaw. And the monster roils in sudden agony because it wasn't expecting to get assaulted by 3 tiny lizard people. It was just swimming back and forth eating bodies and body parts, because let's face it, this is a feast for a monster like that. And the chieftain is promptly run over and like chomped up into his mouth. Father, no! You can see the lightning attacks going on in its mouth, and it spits out the chieftain of the Padclaw tribe, who goes splashing across the ground like a skipping stone. Stands with a fist, runs, and like punches it again. Phudo's starting to actually aim for the eyeballs, aim for the inside of the mouth, so his crossbow bolts can get through. And they do enough damage to make it mad, basically. And it rolls again, and it smashes Stands with a fist, like straight up smashes her. She broke a lot of ribs. Like if she had not had like 9 levels in Monk to have enough HP for that, she would have been like roadkill. That would have been the end of her. And she flies across from sheer blunt force trauma and smashes into a tree, and it rolls again to like crush the tree and her in this gigantic attack. And finally Phudo's like, I pull one of the death arrows, because he's had a couple of death arrows, and he got a death arrow from his father for his birthday. And he shoots the death arrow up into the monster's mouth and out the back of its head, exploding with brain matter out the other side. And then there's silence. And I say, Phudo, your father is laying bruised and broken on one side of you, and Stands with a fist has, at the very least, a shattered ribcage to the other side of you. I hate to be Telltale Games on you, but which one are you going to see first? So he goes to see his father first, and he makes him drink a potion. He's not conscious. The staff is gone. That lightning bolt staff, gone. The shaman and the wise man come, and they gather up Stands with a fist, who is barely alive, and they disappear into the trees. All 5 or 6 of them. No, it would have been 5. The Abaya is dead. The 5 of them retreat into the trees, far away from what remains of the Padclaw tribe burrow. So the chieftain of the Padclaw tribe could go any second. He might not wake up. Stands with a fist is mortally wounded. She might not wake up. The Padclaw tribe is in ruins. You know, they don't know if anybody is left alive. So they've got the 27 settlers and just the kobold they've got here, when there used to be 700. They have been destroyed. And no doubt Oceanrim has noticed the giant catastrophic hole to another dimension, so they can't even go back. They have no home. There is no Padclaw tribe. They must retreat back to the Thirsty River Rock and pray that the chieftain lives, and pray that Stands with a Fist lives, because there's nobody left. And that is where we will leave off for today. So I hope you enjoyed that story, and I will see you guys on the next D&D Stories. Keep gaming. Hi guys, T here. Remember to hit that like button for me on your way out. If you'd like to see artwork and maps from my gaming table, check out the D&D Stories Facebook page. Also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to toss a few gold pieces into your humble bard's hat. Links in the description below. Keep gaming!